When you partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Iron Solutions, and I've got someone that's a little bit different than most of the guests that we have on the podcast here. It's something that I'm trying to figure out how to do myself and get better at and try to grow this. But I got Alex Kenney, and he's the senior data analytics person. Am I butchering that, Alex?
Yeah, senior data scientist.
Senior data scientist. All right. So the idea of taking so much data that we have right now, Alex, and trying to find the answers to questions that we've all been, keeping us up at night about, and the amount of data that we have available to us in any industry, whether it's, you name it, there's so much data out there. It's pretty easy to start to kind of go through all that and find answers. But the hard part is finding the right parts to formulate the answer to the question you're trying to find, correct?
That is absolutely right. It's quite a process. So a lot of what I do involves looking towards the future with predictive analytics, looking at past equipment transactions to predict what they might look like in the future. But yeah, it can be very complicated. There's so many different aspects of that transaction that you have to take a look at, and you have to figure out which ones are going to work for you. Yep. And which ones will not. And sometimes that's a little bit easier said than done.
Yeah. I've done the whole project where I've spent 3 or 4 or 5 days pulling down the data, looking everything over, and start kind of formulating the different pivot tables and all the stuff to make everything kind of come together, and grossly realize that you spend all that time for nothing, because what you have there isn't going to answer the question that you're looking for, or the data is so miscombobulated that you can't even use the data. It's the right data, but it's just not formulated right, or start all over. But that's the fun side of this. So I guess with let's talk a little bit about what you're doing over at Iron Solutions. So Iron Solutions is under the Randall Riley umbrella, and I've got to believe that with what Randall Riley is bringing to the table, plus what Iron Solutions is bringing to the table, that you have more data than you know what to do with. So I guess talk a little bit about what you're doing there, and some of the processes that you're going through to find these various answers for these questions.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's what I spend all day, every day doing. Mm-hmm. So our process is kind of changing right now. This is kind of an exciting time for us. We create these, we call them our predictive models. And which is just, in layman terms, that's just like the mathematical equation that goes into our valuation products. So when you enter in the information about your equipment and you click the button to find out what it's worth, all the magic that happens in the background, that's what we develop. And that was developed. I came to Iron Solutions about 8 years ago. And that was the first thing I did, create the predictive model. And since then, it's just been like a matter of updating it, with new transactions that have occurred every year, keeping it current. We have a new process that we literally just implemented. Just a couple weeks ago, we finished our first iteration of it. We have a new predictive modeling software we use. It's called Data Robot. And it uses artificial intelligence to create the best predictive model possible. So in the past, we used to have to look at all these different aspects of the transaction to find out what is a good predictor of that future value, but we'd have to do it manually.
Right.
And it would take literally weeks or even months to comb through all the possibilities. But data robot saves us an enormous amount of time, and now within minutes, it'll tell us these are the sort of predictors that you want to use. Here's how you should use them, and that sort of thing. And then it's our job to make that happen.
Okay. So that is the that's one thing that I'm looking at too, trying to figure out when are people going to come in and buy, what are their buying criteria that they're typically running into. When you're looking at the stuff that you guys have, where you have just a mountain of data coming into you from sold reports and those kind of things, and what's coming through over the last 8 years, what are some of the common things that you've seen that are kind of repeatable from a data perspective, and then what are some of the stuff that you're starting to see pop up now that is kind of having to morph your algorithms and those kind of things to be more in tune with what's happening in the marketplace?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. That's obviously that's something we're looking at all the time. Usually
Mhm.
about once a year, we'll really sit and take a look at those aspects of our predictive model. The biggest things that we see change in that regard are usually reflective of the larger aspects of the economy.
Mhm.
Whenever there's a little bit of a downturn in the economy, we know something crazy is going to happen in the data. When you look at our charts, we know that when economic times get a little bit interesting, the
Yeah.
lines are going to zigzag a little bit more.
Right.
So we see that sort of thing. And now with COVID is finally kind of coming to a close. I guess it's kind of been that way for a little bit now, but it's still a little bit too soon to say how that is going to affect everything. But we're anticipating. We don't know what to anticipate, except it's going to be something we haven't seen before.
Sure.
At least not in a very long time. So we're very interested to see how that's going to turn out. Which I would expect pretty soon we're going to really start to be able to see that in the larger data.
Yep. So here's a question I'm going to ask you, and you can answer it if you want to, and if not, I'll ask you a different one. But you're looking at what's happening in the marketplace right now, and you see all the influx of uh, of pricing that you see coming through right now. So the volatility that we've seen over the last 18 months, where we had a huge run up in price, and then we've kind of pinnacled, we kind of peaked there probably 12 months ago, and then it's kind of slowly been notching its way down as supply has been catching up with demand. And we're seeing that come together now. From a predictive analytics perspective, I mean, how do you keep up on top of that ever? I mean, that's a rapidly changing thing. I mean, that's a day to day, if not month to month for sure, change. When you're looking at that, how do you keep up on that? And then what's your data telling you in the future? Are you starting to see some numbers come out that are showing, hey, we're going to be down, 25, 30% or whatever those numbers are coming up with?
Yeah, no, there's a few different things that we do with that, but the most important thing is that we keep our models current with the most recent transactions. Up until this point, we've updated these predictive models annually. That's going to be changing, though. We have we have some. I shouldn't really go into the details, but we do have some plans of how we're going to be updating those models quite a bit more frequently because of all these changes that you're talking about.
Yep.
Updating it once a year might not quite cut it moving forward, and we know that. But we also place a little bit more emphasis on recent transactions as well, not completely. We usually look back. It just depends on a lot of factors, but
Sure.
we usually look at transactions going back like 10 or 15 years.
Mhm.
And we usually place more emphasis on more recent years to account for those sorts of things. Yeah, I'd say that's really the major thing that we do.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that you're looking at when you're looking at some of these predictive indicators, I've always thought, hey, it'd be cool to go back in and take a look at, auction value against, a corn chart, and splash it against there and, see if how linear the movement is. Cause I'm a firm believer that it's not necessarily the price of the product that is of the commodity that's driving buying habits as much as it is the movement in the marketplace from points to point, right? So it's not so much like, $3 corn, obviously $3 corn is going to be devastating, but if it goes from $3 to $3.75, then all of a sudden you start seeing some movement, you know what I mean? And that's where those indicators are. Is it, as a percent of growth from where, and those kind of things. Talk a little bit about how you're using that kind of data to kind of formulate what you're talking about.
Yeah, so when it comes to our predictors, we really group them into two categories. We have the data that comes from those the sold reports, the transaction reports, what have you, and then there's like the data we get from other sources, and that's like the data about commodities. That's
Sure.
the biggest one, and the commodity prices, those tend to not have as much of an effect on compared to some of the other predictors, such as the machine's age,
Right.
its meter reading, that sort of thing. But of course that changes all the time too, and that's just one of the many things that we have to stay on top of. But yeah, we look at those external and kind of macroeconomic factors as well. And those have a more significant impact than the commodity prices as well. But of course, the commodity prices do matter. There's a reason we include them.
Yeah, that's the thing about the commodity prices, I think is overstated sometimes when folks are looking at that. Don't get me wrong, the price of commodities absolutely is going to drive people's buying habits and profitability and all. I get all that, but where you start seeing those make a difference is in the movements of going from one point to the next point. What's that look like, and how those things come together? So those are definitely some stuff out to pay attention to. So when you're looking at your kind of long-term spectrum now, and kind of get out your crystal ball here and talk a little bit about the future here, but as you're looking ahead, what are some of the, I guess, trend line you're starting to see develop in your data?
What trend lines we see in our data? Now that's a good question. I said, right now, there's just so many questions.
Right.
Just I talked about it a little bit earlier, but with COVID and the fact that ag machinery is they're big computers today,
Right.
And with the supply chain issues with computer chips and all that sort of thing, right now it's probably more difficult than ever to say what exactly the future is going to hold. I know you've talked to like people like John Womack a number of times. People like him, they have a better pulse on what the ag equipment market has in store for the future, just because they've worked in that industry for so long.
Sure.
And me being more of a data guy and not so much, I don't want to say I'm not an ag guy, because I am, but I'm more of a data guy. So I look more at the data and not so much ag, if that makes sense.
Well,
but that's why we have
sense,
people like John Womack and that sort of thing. And they could probably shed better light on that than me. So I don't want to give any bad information.
I hear you. That's fine. That's fine. So when you're looking at, let's talk a little bit about the data and stuff that you can pull back across from with your partners over there at like EDA, for example. So if you're looking at some of the stuff they're doing, you get so many different sold reports on such a spectrum of equipment. We're talking everything from combines to wheel loaders to skid steers to grain carts to auger, you name it. You guys get all kinds of stuff. Do you notice any time in those data points, especially since so much of your stuff comes from the ag equipment sector? Do you see certain points where maybe combines might not be doing good, but skid steers are really on fire? I mean, do you see some counterbalancing there of some of the extremes, I guess, when you're looking at some of your equipment?
Yeah, a little bit. A lot of times when larger equipment, combines, large row crop tractors, that sort of thing, when they're going up in value, you'll see similar larger machines going up as well. But then sometimes you'll see something like if large row crop tractors are going up, small row crop might go down a little bit. But if I had to just kind of overgeneralize a little bit, I'd say because macroeconomic factors play so much of a role in this, they tend to kind of move in unison, directionally speaking, anyway.
Yeah. So I got something I would love your feedback on, and obviously you don't have to give it to me right now because you don't have time to look at it, but maybe sometime offline here you can give it to me. But I have this theory that when 4-wheel drive tractors are going up in price, and they're more demand for those. Sprayers have the adverse effect. Their demand's going down, and their prices are going down, and vice versa. And my thought process behind that is, every 5 years, the no-till guys have to go back in and till up the ground that they're working, and they have to go either find a 4-wheel drive tractor, or have rent, demand, whatever it is that they're doing with that 4-wheel drive tractor, so they can go in and till up what they need to till up. Because you see tillage kind of do the same thing every 5 years, these big peaks and stuff like that. And my theory is that because of no-till practices and having to go back in and weed resistance and those kind of things, you got to go back in and till it up. And so it's every 3 to 5 years you see this big swing. Do you notice those kind of things in your data where you see some, like, you've notated, like, hey, when X does Y, Y does this, and are you seeing those kind of things pop up a lot in your data?
Yeah, the example you gave, I'm not sure that I've looked at that one specifically, but that's interesting, and I've made a mental note to take a look, just because personally I think that's interesting, and I'm curious now. But we do notice those sorts of things. Unfortunately, that sort of that falls into a category of, like, information that's interesting, but we can't really use. And I'll tell you why. Yeah, the reason is because, like, let's just say, I'm going to make up an example. This is definitely hypothetical here. But let's just say that we're able to do the math, and we figure out that future prices of used combines negatively correlate with tractors. So when one goes up, the other goes down. Let's say that we figure that out. We don't like to use data that we predict and feed that into another one of our predictive models. We like to say, you might have heard Cameron Hernard say this before, but that makes us masters of our own domain. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to take data that we come up with on our own and feed that into our own predictive model. You see where that's going. That we don't want to do that. So we have noticed things like that, but we haven't really been able to put it to use.
Yeah. That's such, like, just what you said. I mean, you're programming your model to find that kind of stuff, and then there's influencers in there that you're feeding that, so it comes back out the way you want it to sometimes. But yeah, that's those little things like that are the things that really I find enjoyable about being in the user equipment business, is trying to figure out those little nuances that, here's some indicators you should start paying attention to, because if this is going to do this, more than likely this is going to do this over here. And I think those are those little key factors that make you successful or don't make you successful, I guess, when you're looking at the big picture. So,
yep.
All right, Alex. So as we're kind of winding this down here, talk to me a little bit about some of the stuff that you got in place now that you're thinking about. Maybe some stuff coming down the pike here that you're going to be using to help make this predictive analytics stuff even more accurate than what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I mentioned Data Robot, our new AI powered software. I won't go into the details of it. I don't know how many math geeks like me tend to listen to your podcast, but there are, but within the predictive modeling industry, so to speak, there are defined metrics that are used to measure how accurate a predictive model is, and ours are far above what you would consider to be like the baseline acceptable level of accuracy. So our models are fantastic. I'm a little bit biased, obviously, but we've got really good predictive models. But with this last update that we did with Data Robot, it was a significant leap forward that I honestly didn't think would be possible at this point. Given how accurate they are, it takes a lot of work to move the needle even a little bit. So we couldn't be more pleased with that. We have one other really interesting project coming down the pipeline, tentatively called, I think it's been decided. It's called Iron Prospect, an entirely new product where we're not predicting the future value of used equipment. Instead, we're trying to predict when individual equipment users are going to make another purchase by looking at their past purchasing behavior and some other aspects of their demographic, like, their zip code,
Right.
what industry they're in exactly, or sub industry, I should say. What is it that they farm? What do they grow? That sort of thing. At this point, we've basically hammered out the math behind it, and now we're looking at implementation. But that's going to be coming down the pipeline in the pretty near future. And again, that's something that we've never applied a predictive model to before until now. And we're very excited to see how that can affect the market in terms of just giving dealers another tool in their toolbox to sell their product. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah. That's one thing I've always wanted to figure out too, is take a look at a grower and say, okay, here's how many acres you farm. And then how do your cropping practices change based around, commodity prices, or something like that. So, if you're looking at just hypothetically 1,000-acre farmer, and they have, 75% of their crop is corn, right? And 25% is, whatever, beans or something. And at what point does that switch to maybe more beans than corn? And then so looking at it from that perspective of, hey, do we sell more corn heads to this guy, or do we need to sell more, flex drapers to this guy, and start trying to figure out how to go after that customer, and when is that flip going to happen, so you can start having that conversation earlier. So I love this stuff. It's very interesting, but you can also go down a lot of rabbit holes too that kind of end up in the middle of nowhere too. So it's a fun experiment no matter what.
Absolutely. And anytime you want to talk about this stuff, I'll talk about it till the cows come home. This stuff,
Awesome. No.
I'm one of those geeks that where this stuff gets me excited and wakes me up in the morning. So
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Alex, that's good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. If folks want to reach out to you or folks over at Iron Solutions, what's the best way to do that?
If anyone wants to get a hold of me, they can just send me an email. It's just alexkenney@randallriley.com.
Right on, Alex. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Go to LinkedIn and Moving Iron Podcast. Check out the video version of this over on YouTube at the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. And then you can go to everything Moving Iron related at MovingIronLLC.com, and you can check it out there. Moving Iron Summit is coming up soon. Check that out, September 11th through the 13th. All the information is up on the website. If you need more information, send me an email at MovingIronPodcast at MovingIronPodcast.com, and I'll make sure to get back to you as soon as I can. Almost filled up on the $50 discount from the folks over at Axon on your registration fee. So take advantage of that if you're thinking about coming. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Ox Kenney. Let's move smart, folks. Out.
Moving higher in the 21st century.